The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, Children's Health Defense, wherever you are. It is my great pleasure and honor today to have with us Aaron Siri, who needs no introduction to our viewers. But Aaron, in addition to being a prominent litigator, has just written an amazing book called Vaccines, Amen. And Aaron, we want you to come on and talk to us about it.
Happy to do it. Good to see you, Mary.
Likewise. So, I really love the book. I think it's a fantastic new contribution. Thank you. And I recommend it to people. It's a real education, very easy to read, very, very right to the point. And I thought I'd start with asking you, what made you decide to write it? It's not like you don't have things to do, Aaron.
It's true. I get asked, there's a number of reasons I want to write the book. One of them was, especially for folks, even folks who are very informed on the topic, I get asked lots and lots of questions. And I figured it's so much easier to just say to folks, hey, just read chapter 10, read chapter 7, go to chapter 3. That's first.
Yeah.
But beyond that, bigger picture, to win in the courthouses, to win in the legislative houses, we have to change cultural cognition around these products. We have to change the way people think about them. And the main shift that I think is really necessary is for people to stop believing in these products and instead start thinking about them. Right. And I wanted to really expose the underbelly of how most of what people think they know about vaccines really are just beliefs. They're not facts. They're not evidence-based. They're dogma. Their beliefs, they're based on repetition over time that go uncontested. And so by exposing that, as I go through the book and do that, my hope is not that people will walk away and go, well, vaccine's good, vaccine's bad, or I'm for or against vaccines. It's just that they walk away going, wow, I should just treat this like every other product. I need to stop believing. I need to start thinking. Just like they're not for or against sheetrock, and they don't think sheetrock's good or bad. They're like, it's sheetrock. If it gives me cancer, yeah, we should change the formulation of how you're making that product. So that was really the primary goal, and I hope everybody reads it. They end up in that place.
So the core message is just think about vaccines, think about them like any other consumer product. Don't think about them as a religious golden calf.
Yeah, stop going when somebody brings up a point about vaccines. If your reaction is, you don't believe in vaccines, you need to read this book.
Yeah.
Because you get that all the time from people. What do you mean you don't believe in vaccines?
Yeah. So the book starts pretty close to the beginning with your remarkable deposition of Dr. Stanley Plotkin, a 9-hour deposition, and you have great passages from it. What was it? And you characterize him as kind of the high priest, right? The godfather of vaccinology. What was it like to depose him?
Well, I could tell you what I expected, and then I could tell you, how I felt at the end of it. I expected a lot of twists and turns. I mean, this was almost 7-8 years ago now. I didn't know, a lot of what I know now. At this point, I've had to really immerse myself in a lot of vaccinology, immunology, infectious disease, pediatrics, and so forth. Where back then, I had a decent command of some of the primary literature, but I just thought there would be loops, things he brought up I didn't know. Like when I said to him, "Hey, is it," and I cornered him on the clinical trial to license the hepatitis B vaccine, Recombavax HB, where the package insert and the summary basis show it was only safety monitored for 5 days after injection in its clinical trial to license it with only 147 kids and no control group. I thought he would come back to me and say, "Oh no, there was a trial with 20,000 kids and there was a placebo control." But that didn't happen during the deposition. He insinuated there might be something. And then we actually subpoenaed him after the depo, and he never, on that specific example, never gave us anything. In fact, he went and got a lawyer and moved to quash the subpoena, incredibly. And then when we FOIA'd the FDA, not to get too far the rabbit hole on this one point, with regards to that one vaccine in the clinical trial, and we got the underlying clinical trial documents, incredibly, what we found was that it was actually Stanley Plotkin that was the principal investigator of the childhood trial for the clinical trial to license for Combavax HB for children. Meaning I literally sat with the man and asked him about, could it really be 5 days of monitoring? And he had done that trial, right? So,
That's incredible.
so going through that, I expected, and by the end of it, I would say that some of the worst fears expressed about what is the safety underpinning these products are, I walked away with it going, those fears are, the reality is probably even worse than those fears.
Yeah.
So, really concerning.
Yeah. So the book talks at great length about the egregious issues in the pre-licensure and post-licensure processes around vaccines. Would you highlight some of those for the viewers? That you go into great detail in the book, but just highlight some of the really extraordinary differences between the way that vaccines and drugs are treated in that world.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of the folks who watch CHGTV know what I'm about to say, but obviously, there were only 3 routine vaccines in the early 80s, right? And kid following the CDC childhood schedule would get 3 injections by 1 year of life. Today, that's grown to 29 injections by 1 year of life on the current CDC schedule. And every single one of those products, as your viewers know, was trialed by a company, except for one. Every one of them, except for one, was a clinical trial by a company knowing, because of the 1986 Act, that they would not be responsible for the deaths and serious injuries caused by those products on the basis they could have made them safer. And so what that does is it obviously drives a differential in how they conduct those clinical trials, because they don't have an economic interest to show that they're safe before licensure. They have the opposite economic interest. With drugs, they don't want to lose money after licensure, so they do multi-year placebo-controlled trials. With vaccines, it's the opposite. The more they do safety testing, the more they're likely to lose money. And so you get like the ridiculous clinical trial we just went through with hepatitis B.
Right.
That's the delta. So for most vaccines, the clinical trial relied upon to license them were days or weeks of safety review, maybe up to 6. And as Secretary Kennedy has often said, that and is categorically true, not a single one of the routine injected childhood vaccines on the schedule was licensed based on a placebo-controlled trial. And I go through every single one of those in the book in chapter 10 with citations to the FDA sources, along with permalinks, so they don't disappear in case they disappear. And you could, see for yourself what the evidence is.
So there's incredible disincentives, you're saying, pre-licensure to learn anything about the safety profile, because you might learn something that would get in the way of licensure. Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely. And corporations, they operate based on what's going to be best for the bottom line, not what's moral, what's ethical, and so forth. That's not the way boardrooms operate. It's not the way corporate officers operate. They operate based on making decisions about what's going to be the most profitable thing for the company, because that's what Wall Street expects. That's what their investors expect.
Right. So what about post-licensure, Aaron? Why does the post-licensure not work the way that it's allegedly supposed to work? To find, when millions of people are using these, 4 million kids in a cohort, why aren't we figuring out, there might be a safety problem?
Who's got the financial incentive to do that work, right? I mean, the post-licensure safety literature, they claim there's mountains and mountains of studies. I'd love to see that mountain. I can't find it. It must be the largest, smallest mountain in the world, because I can't find it. When you actually, and not only can't I find it, the Institute of Medicine can't find it. When they were commissioned by the CDC and the Health Resources Service Administration, HRSA, to review the entire vaccine safety literature post-licensure, for what they said were the 158 most commonly claimed vaccine injury pairs. And HRSA is the agency that defends against vaccine injury claims in the Federal Court of Claims and Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. So what were they doing? They were trying to get the Institute of Medicine to find that these 158 claims that they're constantly getting hit with are not caused by vaccines. Even the Institute of Medicine couldn't have reached that conclusion. For over 130 of those vaccine injury pairs, including encephalopathy, brain damage from MMR vaccine, encephalopathy from varicella vaccine, encephalopathy from a bunch of the other vaccines, just as a few examples. They said, sorry, CDC, sorry, HRSA, can't tell you because you haven't done the studies. So again, it's not me saying that the post-licensure safety literature is vacuous. It's the Institute of Medicine.
Yeah.
In a report where the CDC was basically bribing them and HRSA was bribing them to find that they're not associated with the vaccinations. I go through all that in chapter 11 of the book.
Right. And I think most people, I think a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that Institute of Medicine is pretty much a gun for hire, right? The institution that pays for the study tends to get exactly the result that they want. And these government agencies actually pay for the allegedly unbiased Institute of Medicine to do particular studies.
I mean, the government is, I believe, the Institute of Medicine's one of their primary clients. You know, the Institute of Medicine, now known as the National Academy of Medicine, was a creature of Congress. Congress created it to effectively advise Congress on questions of science. It is not part of government, as you know, right? It's outside of government.
Right.
But as you just said, Mary, exactly right. A lot of their money comes from government and reviews. So they tend to want to make government happy when they're paying them millions and millions of dollars to answer a question.
Right, right. I recently spoke with Gavin DeBecker about his new book, Forbidden Facts. And lo and behold, when it came to autism or it came to Agent Orange and causation, you know, Institute of Medicine never found causation, never found a correlation. So it's, it seems like it's a pattern.
Well, you know, on that point, if I may, see, you know, that's the thing. When you need to find causation, it's easy to say, well, there's just not enough evidence, which is what they did in those scenarios.
Right.
But when you say, I want you to find there isn't causation, and the IOM looks, and they're like, as one example, and I think your viewers probably know this, one of the questions that the CDC and HRSA asked was, does DTaP cause autism? DTaP given at 2, 4, 6 months of life. Pertussis vaccine was in fact one of the vaccines that in the '86 Act, Congress said to HHS, hey, a lot of people are complaining that pertussis vaccine caused autism. Can you review that? So here we are all the way in 2012. They're asking the IOM, does DTaP vaccine cause autism? And the problem that IOM has is they can't find any studies that show that it doesn't cause autism. Not a single one. But they only found one study of DTaP and autism, Geyer and Geyer, that did show a correlation. They threw out because it's VAERS data. So it's a lot harder to say that something is not caused by vaccines because when there's no data, so there's no studies. So they had no choice. For sure, had they found something, they could have maybe gotten there, but there's literally nothing.
But Aaron, I think you point out in many places in the book, when the Church of Vaccinology, when the vaccines amen crowd find that there's no evidence, they then take a leap that most of us would call a lie to say, no, they're safe. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that is what the vaccinologists and those in that circle do. In fact, we saw it in a recent ACIP meeting where the chief medical officer of the CDC's Immunization Safety Office stood there and said that the Institute of Medicine in 2012, found that the hepatitis B vaccine was safe. That's a ridiculous statement.
Yeah.
The Institute of Medicine reviewed 20-something of serious conditions of whether the people are complaining of most commonly claimed injuries from that B vaccine, and it said, for every one of these, we don't know if the vaccine caused or not because you haven't done the studies. For one, we could reach a conclusion, and that's it. So that scientifically, logically, the only conclusion you can reach from that is that you don't know if it's safe. However, the chief medical officer of the Immunization Safety Office, CDC, says that is support that it's safe. That's ridiculous. That's not science. In fact, I have never seen any area of science. We litigate all kinds of areas of science, with regards to product-related injuries. I don't know of any other discipline where the lack of evidence is used to claim the vaccine, that the product doesn't cause the injury. Only vaccinologists and those in that circle do that. It's incredible.
Yeah, it is, and you draw that out repeatedly, and it's very helpful. So tell us more. Who do you think is this vaccines amen crowd? You kind of go through different categories, the high priests and the disciples, but who in your mind are the vaccines amen crowd?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I have a hierarchy of the vaccinologists, that then basically the rest of the medical community, and obviously from there, there's the public health officials, and then there's the public. To me, the vaccine and main crowd as follows. Most vaccinologists are in that crowd. And then, it gets a narrower and narrower, the number of people in each of those groups as I go down the list: medical community, the public. But, at its core, the vaccine and main crowd are those folks who believe in these products, and they hold fervent beliefs that even when you present them with the evidence to the contrary, even when it's from their own oracle, the CDC, they just won't accept it. They're impervious to data, they're impervious to reason, logic. They say, well, vaccines stop transmission, and they can't accept the data that shows that most of the vaccines, in fact, don't do that. Right? They just don't. And they will still hold on to that belief. And those are the folks that when you confront them with the data and you say, whoa, 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 you're blaming pertussis cases on the unvaccinated, but the pertussis vaccine does not stop transmission, period. That is what the science clearly and categorically shows. The established, accepted, no contested FDA and so forth science. Like, it's just, and I can even explain it to you. There's no mucosal immunity that's generated when you inject the pertussis vaccine, right? So it still proliferates, and they find it in the nasopharynx, right? So, like, there it is. There's the science. There's the data. And when you confront them with that data, instead of them going, oh, I should read that, I should look at that more carefully, instead, they refuse to accept it, and they just have an emotional reaction. Why? Because they're not thinking and approaching you from here, from their intellect. They're coming from their emotions, from what their feelings are about it, their beliefs are. So they get angry. And what do? They then have to censor you. They have to call you names. They have to call you pejoratives. They have to treat you as less than human, right? I mean, those are the one of two ways that somebody's going to go on this, in my opinion. They're either going to have a moment of reflection, or they're going to start having to call you names. And you can see very clearly who goes down the name calling path and who goes down the, okay, let's intellectually engage in this path.
So you make the point, Aaron, just now that the response from vaccinologists to evidence is actually an emotional one. And you contrast that in the book with so-called anti-vaxxers who typically are a lot more knowledgeable and have really intellectually made a decision that this product just isn't for them. Is that accurate?
Well, with the vaccinologists, I would say actually vaccinologists often won't engage, right? That's why they won't publicly debate. They won't show up at debates. That's why they don't come up to the Senate hearings to debate. They don't, they stay in the background pretty, well. And that's why the few opportunities to depose them were incredible opportunities, and when they show up, we take them. That said, your typical, let's call it infectious disease doctor, they don't know almost anything about vaccines. I've deposed and engaged with many of them. They typically pretty much know, slogans about vaccines for the most part. And so when you confront them with evidence, with data, and you challenge them, they get emotional about it because they can't draw from their intellect. They get angry. They go down that path that I described. Those folks are solidly in the vaccine main crowd. There are also incredible doctors out there, to be sure, but they went the other way. They were like, you know what? Let me look at let me look at the underlying clinical trial data. Wow, pre-licensure, there's no way you can say they're safe. Any objective doctor, scientist has to reach that conclusion. And then if they look at the post-licensure literature, they're going to end up at the same place. And then when they look at some of the other data about the harms it can cause, you now have to, treat this as something you can really engage with. You have to engage with it instead of go down this emotional path that they're just wrong. They're, and so forth. I'm intellectually superior. I'm morally superior. They're just bad. They're selfish. They're,
Right.
anti-vaxxers. They're anti-science.
Right.
They're just pejoratives.
Yeah.
And so Yeah, so that is the divide that I'm often talking about. Now, for those who choose not to vaccinate, and this is the part that's often so, it's just like it's like the world is upside down. Those who choose not to vaccinate, they're often not emotional about the products, right? Like these other folks are. They might be unhappy their kids excluded from school, but they have no feelings or emotions or about the products themselves. And often, actually, they have looked at the underlying data sources, so they can talk to you about the pre-licensure safety, the
Right.
post-licensure safety. I have found the average parent that does not vaccinate knows that and knows more about the underlying products and can speak more with more about data and science than the typical infectious disease doctor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's shocking. So one of the questions that you touch on in the book is, had the vaccines on men crowd left the relatively small minority of non-vaxxers and ex-vaxxers alone, probably this process could have gone on for a long time. Why do you think that the vaccines on men crowd is so predisposed towards coercion and getting that last person vaccinated? We've got to exclude those kids from school. We've got to punish those people who won't take the shot and throw them out of their jobs. What is that zealotry? Because it seems to be against the very interest of sort of the vaccines on men crowd.
It is. They are shooting themselves in their own foot, but that's the way religion goes. When somebody doesn't, when it's a religion, when it's a belief, people who don't share that belief, they cause discord. They cause cognitive dissonance. They cause emotional discord. And I think that's a lot of what drives this irrational, almost, zealous drive to eliminate exemptions. Had they not eliminated exemptions, for example, in California in 2015, and kicked out God knows how many people from that state, I don't know if Del Bigtree would be doing what he's doing today. I mean,
Sure.
that's what really lit the fire.
Yeah.
And he'll tell you that, and activated so many folks. There are not folks out there protesting about statins. Statins hurt a lot of people. There are a lot of drugs out there that hurt a lot of people, but you don't have to take it. Nobody's going to coerce you to take it, and so you don't have an anti-statin movement, okay? But you have a movement with regards to vaccines, because those that the mandates affect are not those who want it. You don't need the mandate for those people. They're going to get it anyway. So who's it impacting? It's impacting the very, group of people who really need to avoid this product. One of their older kids has passed away from it. One of their other kids have been seriously injured from it. And they don't want to continue vaccinating that or maybe one of their other children. And there's no amount of beatings that you're going to be able to do to get that parent to vaccinate. That's who these mandates, affect. And yeah, those folks aren't just going to quietly go away. Now, had you let them have their check the box exemption, you wouldn't know how to fight with them. And states, even to today, 45 states effectively, okay, have a check the box exemption. West Virginia's almost done, right? Have a check the box, 46 states, we could say then. Have a check the box exemption. You could send your kid to school, all right? So 45 and a half. And in many of the states, they have a very high vaccination rate, meaning they could do it without the coercion. But there has been a drive more and more to make it so that you don't have any choice. And with that, when you deprive that choice from people, you're going to create folks who are going to come out and fight you. I mean, the work that our firm does is mostly about the civil and individual rights to say no to this medical products or any medical product. We fought mask mandates because it was mandated. I don't fight statins because nobody mandates it. And
Right.
then of course you'll get the papers say, well, he's fighting on safety and efficacy. That's because they argue that these products are safe and effective as a way to mandate them.
Right.
They make that a political issue. They make that a legal issue, not me.
So you characterize this as a religion and zealotry that's pushing this coercion, but this is such a global phenomenon, Aaron. Every government in the world at this point is pushing these products that really don't have an adequate scientific basis. We've discussed that. Do you see this all as zealotry, or do you see the motivation as something different than that?
There's a range. I mean, look, I think for most folks, they just don't know. They're not in the vaccine amen crowd. I think most parents are not vaccine amen crowd. Now, they have orthodox views about vaccines. If you stop them on the street and you say, hey, what do you think of vaccines? Like, oh, they're great. But not because they've reviewed the underlying sources. But those folks, when you confront them with the underlying sources and you show them, they go, oh, and they might change their views on it. Those folks are not in the vaccine amen crowd. It's those who then, when you confront them and you show them, they just get angry and they still won't change their views. So I think most folks are not in the vaccine amen crowd. They just don't know, right? They're good parents. They just want to do good. And they're told, do what your doctor says. Now, globally, I think that there is a cohort of these vaccine amen crowd folks. I think that but there's a mix. You have the corporations who just want to make money. I don't think they're vaccine ameners. They're just doing what corporations are supposed to do. Take the actions that are likely to lead to the most amount of profit. And with vaccines, unlike every other product out there, you can't sue them to argue it could be made safer, right? And so they have that inverse financial incentive. So they're not going to do the safety. They then use the billions of dollars they make every year to do what? They're not like a car company. They're not putting advertisements typically on TV to convince you cars are great. Instead, they're a lot smarter about it, or they do what makes sense, which is they put lots and lots of money into funding the journals, funding the doctor associations, funding pharma reps, funding, go down the medical schools, go down the entire, list of the learned intermediaries, the trusted health authorities. They have dollars flowing to all of them, and they influence all of them. So all of those folks start developing views about these products, and then they're the ones who go on media typically, and they're the ones who project out what people think about these products. So within that, it's just good business for the most part. And then you do have your vaccine zealots as well. The vaccine amen folks that are interspersed through them. And the closer they are, and the more conflicted they are, the more they become zealots along the way, unfortunately. Yeah. So it's like many systems in life, it's complex. There's lots of moving pieces. I tried to just capture it in 3 minutes, but I lay it out in long form in the book.
Yeah, no. The book is very detailed and very well resourced, and it's really super. So you talk in the book, Aaron, about correcting the course. So what does that look like to you? What does correcting this course look like?
Well, first, I think that we need to actually respect the right to informed consent, which means no more mandates. Government needs to persuade people on the merits if they want to persuade people. And if they can't persuade them, that's where it needs to end. So that, to me, is the number one most critical thing, right? That needs to get done. And we could see in Florida, God bless their Surgeon General and their governor, they're going to remove mandates, which will make them, by the way, just like most provinces in Canada and Norway and Sweden and Denmark and Australia, right? It's amazing that they're more free than we are here, the land of the free. So that's the first thing that happens. And for anybody, I mean, I'm guessing there's not going to be many people watching the show who already don't agree with this, but I say this often, but for those who are out there and anybody watching this, tell this to others who love every vaccine and they love every mask mandate and they love stay-at-home orders, and maybe they do. But if the day comes where there's a product the government says they have to inject into themselves or their kid or ingest or wear that they don't want, if they don't fight back now against government overreach, they might be too late. Because if you can't go to school and you can't get a job and you can't leave your home and you can't go to church and you can't go public transportation without getting a medical product you don't want, then you don't really have any rights. So, and that's why I consider the right to informed consent and the right to say no without any coercion a fundamental right, just as important as free speech, freedom of assembly, and so forth. The other thing that's critical, I mean, is just we got to get rid of the immunity, the liability for these products, so that and we got to get government out of the business of vaccines.
Yeah, I think in government out of the business of medicine, right? If we end mandates and, maybe, it, anyway, yes, absolutely. We need to get rid of the liability protections, get rid of all the medical mandates. So you've described vaccines here as a religion, and the Constitution, the First Amendment, prohibits the establishment of religion. So is this something that you consider to be legally challengeable? Is this, in that you've basically shown us that there's no science behind this regime, is this a religion that's been established that should be challenged on a constitutional basis?
I love that question, Mary, because I thought about that a lot. Do I say this is a violation of the Establishment Clause? I've never gone that far. I have argued often in court and in papers that essentially what the health department wants to do is they want to force, let's say, this family to forego their actual sincerely held religious beliefs in favor of the health department's religious beliefs.
Yeah.
And I say, look, they arguing they got, this kid can't go to school because he could spread something. But the product they're saying he should get doesn't stop transmission. So what they're saying is the parent and the state and the health department all have to engage in this mythical thinking. We all have to pretend the product does something it doesn't. That's a belief. That's religion. When I look at if I point to some product and I say it does something it cannot do as a basis to throw a child out of school, that's not only religion. One would even characterize it as not only just wrong but evil. If we're going to go into biblical kind of speak, when you often what do you call in the Bible attributing properties to an inanimate object that it doesn't have? There's a term for that. It's called idol worship.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I mean, by forcing these parents to say, no, you must believe this product does something it actually doesn't do. What is that akin to?
Yeah.
But I've never gone to court and said that. I've never done that.
Well, I think you're building the case, Aaron. I see this book as a first step. It's building the case. But I want to ask you one other question. So some people might think that this book is in some ways anti-religion. How would you respond to that?
Oh, no, most certainly not. I've more, we, as a firm, we bring tons of cases to defend religious freedom, religious liberty. And in fact, some of the work I'm the most proud of at our firm that we've done, including preventing, a discharge of over 10,000 members of the Air Force whose religious beliefs didn't allow them to get a co-vaccine, restoring a religious exemption in Mississippi, restoring a religious exemption to the UC California system, and you can go down the list, as well as all kinds of other religious freedom cases. I use the term religion just because in this instance, it was just the most fitting term in that these folks hold on to beliefs about these products, and we just went through some of it, that just require you to engage in live faith. I struggled. I didn't know what other term to use because it is religion. Now, some people have said to me, well, isn't it more of a cult? The thing with cults is cults are when a very small fringe group of folks hold that belief. Religions are when the beliefs are widespread. I would say that the religion that I describe in this book, these beliefs that these products are the most thoroughly tested products ever, pre-licensure, the most thoroughly tested post-licensure. They only harm 1 in a million. They all prevent transmission. Millions in America would die without these vaccines. Every one of the statements I just said are beliefs. They are beliefs. They are not fact. They are, in fact, easily and 100% easily disproven. Okay? And so that it's a religion. Now, I sure hope that if enough people read the book, and that's just one piece of it, obviously, or get information. There are lots of other ways to get information to learn about these products. My book's one of them. And as I said earlier, start thinking and stop believing in the vaccines. I sure hope we get to the point where it does become a fringe small group that continues to believe in these products,
Yeah.
to think of it. And then I will rename my book, Vaccine, The Cult of Vaccines. Okay. And
I
also,
love that.
then the cult of vaccines
I
instead of the
love
religion
that.
of vaccines. I hope
Let's
one
get
day
to that.
I'm forced and have to do that.
I love that. I look forward to that day. So, Aaron, is there anything else you want to talk to people about before we close?
Oh, woo. I'll just reiterate something I said earlier, which is anybody out there who's watching this, and obviously folks who watch CHD, they're this show, and you guys are, I think, often already know a lot about this problem, what the issue is, and I would say that if everybody out there who had a level of knowledge about these issues, and I think probably a lot of people watching this do, talk to others. You don't have to go and tell them everything. You don't have to go and say let me show you everything. Just show them one thing. Just take them to the FDA website, show them the package insert for the Hep B vaccine and say, go to section 6.1 and say, do you think that 5 days of safety monitoring after injection with 147 kids, that could have established safety? Especially if they're a health professional, they'll immediately realize, whoa, that's a problem. Just show them one thing. The more folks out there that you can influence to start thinking about these products in any way, the closer we are to the day where I can rename my book, The Cult of Vaccines. And obviously my book has a lot of information, but CHD's website has tons of resources you can go to. And, and also the nonprofit that I typically represent, ICANN, they've got a ton of resources on the website. There are a bunch of credible state groups around the country, in Mississippi and all across the states around America. A lot of them are CHD groups, and they have their own websites, and they have great information. And if you're really motivated, you could even hook up with one of those groups and go to your local state representative.
Yeah.
Go sit and talk with them. Let me tell you, the typical state senator, state representative in most states, nobody visits them often. When 3 constituents come to their office, that's a great day. They want to sit down. They want to hear them. Take that opportunity. Go down there, print something out from CHD's website, or ICANN. I mean, I don't know if they'll read my whole book. Maybe photocopy one page from the book if that's what you want to do. Bring it to them. Say, just read this. Just go in and talk to them 1 or 2 things. Maybe you get them to start thinking about it. So that's what I would end with. If we're gonna accomplish this, there's no one person. There's not even one group that can do this. We need everybody who understands this issue to go out and do one piece. Just one few hours once a year. If everybody watchers did that, I think it would make a big difference.
Awesome. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. Really a pleasure.
Thank you, Mary.
We're live. Can you tell us who you are?
My name is Heather McCarthy, and I'm from Indiana.
And Lee Ford from Vancouver, Canada.
And you guys met because of a tragedy.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of to share our story a bit. My son was given, he had a deviated septum. He needed to have nasal surgery. So as a preventative, a lot of times when we go into surgery, we get antibiotics. So he was given a very large dose of a very powerful antibiotic. They're called fluoroquinolones, but most people know them as Levaquin, Cipro, Alaflax is another one. So he was given this for preventative, so he wouldn't get an infection, and started having a lot of adverse effects from the drug while he was taking it. Unfortunately, he wasn't really listened to in that. I think one of the things we see with vaccine injury, but also just injury from any pharmaceutical or health treatment, you're told that something is so rare that it really, that's not what's going on. So unfortunately, in my son's case, we just tried to address it, and it sounds like pure craziness, but the result for my son is the doctor wanted him to see a psychiatrist. And they actually, this was a young man who never had mental health issues, but he was having a lot of the adverse effects, and they're all on the labeling of this drug.
So just to back up a bit, he had his surgery.
Yes.
So before the surgery, he took rounds of antibiotics.
Yes.
And then after the surgery,
He started having problems.
okay. Are you
So-
able to describe what those problems are?
He had a lot of confusion. He had a lot of these drugs, and some people will know it as being flaxed. It's happened to many, many people. Joint pain. It causes damage at the cellular level, and it causes a lot of central nervous system or neuropsychiatric issues. My son was in college at the time this happened, but one of the first few things is high anxiety, not being able to think straight, like I said, joint issues and pain. We just really didn't know what was going on. And this went on 4 months. And despite him connecting it to the drug, I think that's something we need to remember. Like our instincts, like he really connected the symptoms he was having to this drug. But unfortunately, there was none of the healthcare providers really listened to him. And he did end up seeing, unfortunately, getting in the mental health system, which I think happens to a lot of victims of adverse reactions to drugs or treatments.
So they're saying
And-
to him, this isn't biomedical, this is this is in your head.
Yes, he actually started hallucinating at one point, and it was really interesting. I'm an attorney. And after this all happened, was able to talk to some very good experts in this field. Hallucinations are from an outside source. They're from a high fever. They're from a drug reaction. That's not really, you might be delusional, but to actually see things. It's just he had all the classic markers of having an adverse reaction to this drug. But unfortunately, he was treated as having mental health issues, which happens to a lot of people who unfortunately can't tolerate this class of antibiotics. And the last thing you want when you're having a toxic reaction to any drug is more drugs. And that's essentially what was done, being treated with benzodiazepines for anxiety or to calm you, because of course you must be hysterical, this isn't happening. It's been a long journey. He passed away, I mentioned, in 2013. Just couldn't tolerate anymore the various treatments he was on that were really just burying what was happening at the core, which he had told everyone, you could see it in the medical records, thinks he's having a reaction to this drug. So I think this really speaks volumes about victims, especially in our health systems, that are the ones who are so rare. What I found is it's not rare to have an adverse effect to a drug. What's rare is having someone believe you. And it was that, my commitment to him, and also my own, it took this to wake me up. I didn't know, trust your doctor. I thought he was at a wonderful, health clinic, one of the best in Chicago, who had initially treated him. And then, you just don't want to believe that this could happen. But it's happening, and it's happening a lot. And after his death, I did testify with a host of other victims throughout the United States at the FDA to get labeling changes on this drug, because now there's a black box warning. And it does address the fact, because another belief with adverse drug reactions is if you stop taking the drug, and whatever its life is in your body, it's that's no longer in your system, that these reactions would stop, and that's an indication it wasn't the drug. That black box warning now is very prominent, that these are irreversible even after you take the drug. So here's a young college, trying to tell people. It just breaks my heart to think about it. But in that journey, I did bring a case against the physicians who didn't listen to him. I heard you talking a little bit about standard of care today. At the core of the standard of care should be the relationship between the doctor and the patient. You have to have informed consent. You have to listen to your patient, and no one listened to my son. So it was my job to get my voice out and make sure people knew about this, because on this journey, he wasn't the only one. There was a host of others. Did stories for whoever would take me. As you all know, it's very hard to get in the mainstream media with stories like this. Nobody wants to really hear them. I was lucky enough to find a reporter out of Indianapolis who did a series of stories. Just a wonderful woman. And that's where kind of Lee comes in. She was out of Canada, but her daughter had a similar experience.
Yeah.
And I'll let her talk about that, but through getting that information out there, which I think we all have an obligation when these things happen to us to speak out as much as we can to help the next person, because my son certainly isn't the only victim of this. We have hundreds, probably thousands in our health system going through something similar.
I'm so sorry what happened to your son. Would you like to talk a little bit about
Yeah, so I'll just give a little bit of my story. Is that my daughter had the same drug as Heather's son, and I had fortunately a much better outcome, because right away I was able to refer to the black box warning. She got it inappropriately. She was only 13. But the black box warning that Heather spoke at the FDA that subsequently was put in place for permanent irreversible damage really helped give validity to my daughter's symptoms. And because she was a healthy 13-year-old and a high-level athlete, it was almost night and day from receiving the drug to within a week of experiencing all the symptoms, which made it easier to recognize as well, versus like somebody that was elderly that was being told, oh, you know, it's normal to become anxious or to have joint pain. She went from being a high-level athlete to barely being able to move her arms or walk, and there was a multitude of other symptoms. It destroyed her gut flora, so she wasn't able to absorb any nutrients, and we were just on a journey. But fortunately did go a more holistic path and did not add more medications onto the mix, and she has recovered very well. And you know, Heather and I got connected through some friend of mine saw her news story, and I was pursuing a lawsuit as well and needed somebody that had, you know, we met through Compassion, and then you joined the lawsuit, and now we create awareness as two moms that have had children that have been harmed by a podcast. We interview other people that have stories and experts, because we are privileged to know so many experts in the field that, you know, it's about basically weighing the risk versus benefit with anything that you put in or on your body, and being your own expert. And the part about being your own expert, it's doing your own research, but also to make sure that you have proper informed consent, because neither of us would have let our children get those medications if we knew there was a permanent disabling side effect warning or a black box warning for suicide, which are in place. So yeah, I mean, we're just trying to save the next people.
We had, and I think we had an obligation and felt a responsibility. I'm an attorney, Lee's a nurse. We just really felt like a lot of times at the, maybe upset our colleagues a little bit, because there is kind of this guild within the healthcare system. A lot of attorneys don't want to take these cases because they just, you know, it's frustrating for me. I can't imagine what my son went through not being believed. He knew exactly what happened to him. And as a mother, I knew in my gut, something's not right here. But oftentimes, like, just the system breaks you down so much. You feel like you're being, you know, overly intrusive, or, you know, I think especially as mothers and parents, when this happens to a child, remember your gut. There's a reason why we have that instinct. It's in, you know, we talk about be the expert, do your own research. Unfortunately, that's even difficult right now, because we know there's a real issue, especially with pharmaceuticals, for the random control trials. You know, we know we're not getting good data, and it's just frustrating. But at least having awareness of what some of the potential adverse effects or risk of a drug or a health treatment are, and being able to weigh that with the benefits, that's our right. You know, that's our right in managing our health care. And it didn't happen in my son's case. Certainly didn't happen in her daughter's case. And we hear stories since we started doing this. One of the things I love most that we do, and our podcast is called NoRisk.org, but and we're exhibitors here today at the Children's Defense Conference. But is hearing stories from actual people that this happened to, because having a community, and that's what's so important about this group, having someone to share your story with, and knowing this, you're not crazy, you're not the only person this has happened to. That's, you know, that's what I owe my son, to do this now for other people. No one should have to go through that. And I would just say to people, yeah, you're right. You know, I remember a reporter doing the story said, if you could say anything to your son Shay right now, what would it be? And I would say, you know, I love him, of course, but he was right. He was so right, and no one believed him.
And he was not alone.
No, and he shouldn't have been. He shouldn't have been, and he should be with us here today. But for that treatment, adverse events happen with drugs. You shouldn't have to die over them. And if there was more acknowledging that these things happen, instead of it being some rare anomaly, I think that, you know, we would have much better health outcomes, especially in this country.
Yeah. Have you heard of Colton Barrett before?
I have not.
He was injured by the Gardasil vaccine. He was permanently disabled, and later on he also passed away because he just couldn't handle the burden that was put on him, and that's not an unusual story. Rachel, she was injured by the COVID vaccine, and ended up, because of the amount of pain she was in, getting hooked on pills that the doctor was giving her, and then later overdosing on fentanyl. And so it's not always an exact cause of death, but it's the catalyst that brings
it's
it.
the impetus.
Right.
It's it takes their
We've talked to a lot of people
self
that
away,
has happened, unfortunately. It's either, sometimes it's the chronic pain that they may be, if it was nerve damage or something, but also just not being believed and suffering in silence. And, you know,
it's
I know I
humiliating.
experienced your own family members.
You know, it's humiliating.
And it's wrong, you know, and it's really
It's beyond
anti-human.
wrong.
Yeah.
It's beyond wrong in the way I see it, and that's why I felt so strongly about pursuing a case against the doctors who treated him, which is a tough road, especially in a state like mine, is that's the human component here. You know, to just completely disregard a young man like that over and over again, it's inexcusable.
And that's why we do what we do, you know, because so many of these people were made to feel like they were crazy.
Yes.
And the beautiful part of it is, you know, Polly going out with the first Vax tour, now Children's Health Defense doing this tour. I mean, what happened with Polly's son is, you know, he was injured by the MMR vaccine. He's permanent brain injury. But because of what happened, all of this has come from that. And you know, thinking about how many children Billy has saved, how many people your children will have saved, you know.
Well, I know that
their
Heather's son
sacrifice.
definitely saved my daughter's life. What you did speaking out for him.
And he knows that.
Yeah.
He does. So, we'll sign your names, or your children's names on the bus.
Thank you.
Thank you for telling your story.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And what was your podcast again? No Risk?
No risk.
No risks. It's KNOW risks with an S.
Yeah, don't
Dot
forget the
org.
S.
Yeah.
NoRisk.org. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. Thank you.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.